You are listening to Know You're Crazy. My name is Susan Denee. We all have CrAzY. What separates us is how we choose to deal with it. I'm going to be delivering engaging and actionable tools to own your crazy, treat your crazy, and turn it into your own superpower. I hope that you walk away from this show feeling the power and strength within you. And never forget to enjoy your journey because you are worth it. Hey everyone, welcome to the Know You're Crazy talk show. My name is Susan Denee, and you are listening to Emotional Recovery in the Raw. It is good to be here today. One of the things that really, that inspires me when I'm preparing for my show is my own life experience. Tonight, I'm going to share a little bit about that before I get into understanding what is your signature crazy and how does it operate. I've talked about this topic in the past. I might dive a little bit into the things that I've already mentioned about personality types and what's common with those personality types as far as how we display our behaviors. But for the most part, I'm just going to give a little bit of experience today and reflect and actually walk you through what I did in order to overcome my crazy over the last, I'd probably say it started last Thursday or Friday. Pretty much the gist of it was I spent an entire week online trying to figure out platforms, technology platforms, social platforms, like a download of information, so much so I didn't know which way to turn. Did you ever have that happen to you? You wanted to learn something new and you almost allowed yourself to get bogged down, overwhelmed with how much information was coming at you. That kind of is what started with the signature crazy for me. But what really became apparent to me was by the end of Friday, I was highly irritable. Get in the car, go to run an errand, drivers on the road are irritating me to the point where I'm muttering things under my breath in my car by myself. Not usually my conduct. I kind of overcame the road rage many years ago. So when it crops up today, I pay attention to that. I didn't really want to give it a lot of power though, but I paid attention to it. Other things, family irritated me. You know, we love who we live with. We choose to have them in our life to bring joy and satisfaction for us and them. It's what we choose to do. Yet when I'm in a bad place, it's like nails down the chalkboard, who's not moving right, who's not doing right. And so all these things were brewing by the end of the day on Friday. And as I started to reflect and I was asking myself, what happened? Because once you become familiar with how you process overwhelming emotions, especially fear, you become more and more comfortable with calling yourself out on it. And this is why I wanted to do this show. How many of us act in a way in which we are unconscious of our behaviors? Or you're someone like me who has spent nearly 20 years in self-development of some sort, whether that was sobriety, whether that was, literally personal development work, therapy, whatever it was. Sometimes we become so self-aware that we actually become ignorant of what decisions that we're making and how they're impacting us. Here's what happened for me. I became highly irritable. I knew something was up. I related immediately to the feeling of overwhelm. And here's what overwhelm can do. Overwhelm can make you feel like it's not enough fast enough. It's not enough fast enough. I got to pause and ask myself a couple questions afterwards when I was realizing how off I became. Things like, where did it go wrong? And the most important question was, what am I scared of? What am I scared of? And that kind of, all of that in summary was what brought me to the show topic today. Because I know for me, if I'm spending a lot of time in self-awareness and I'm on a regular basis taking a look at myself and how I impact and I'm helping others realize that about themselves, if I'm still capable of going crazy, because, I'm human, I'm not saying I should be above that, but how many people who watch this show or who watch the video clips, they themselves suffer from moments of overwhelm or stress, and they haven't quite got to the point of checking it so that they don't have to return to that and make some life-changing decisions that will hopefully get them to the next level of satisfaction of whatever that is for them. And so that's why I chose the topic today. And so the point is, what can we do to shift gears in order to not only overcome maybe the moment of crazy, which is what I've talked a lot in the past, but to make decisions so that whatever's hindering in our path doesn't continue to hinder us much longer. There's a couple of things that'll happen when we get into our signature crazy. One of those is we will have unfortunate behaviors that will become bothersome. Behaviors like I was explaining to you, I became irritable. People around me, those close to me, the ones I choose to spend my time with, started to frustrate me. Acquaintances that I would come across maybe got on my nerves, right? Like things like that. I could find myself, venting out loud. Sometimes if you have what I would categorize now, keep in mind, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a mental health professional. Like I didn't go to school for that, but I will say I'm okay talking about OCD a little bit because I've suffered from it. Let's say you got some OCD patterns. For me, one of mine is, I'll start picking at my lip, or, some people will scratch, some people will pick. Other behaviors that may come up for you when your crazy is going a little bit haywire, you may overspend. You may have, no way to guard yourself from limits. Personal discipline goes right out the window. And so underneath all these behaviors, at some point, we got bothered by something during the week. Now, this is just kind of like a spot check, right? Like this is a weekly spot check or a moment of signature crazy where you can turn around and say, okay, these things I'm aware of, this is what's gone on, but there's still going to be another layer in which you get to. Some of the things that you may notice when you're experiencing your signature crazy is you'll have different body reactions. Sometimes you'll tense up, you might tense up a lot. Find that you're not breathing, or all of a sudden you're just, if you catch it, right? Another one is the emotional reactions. Those were the outbursts that I was mentioning, the emotional, temper tantrum, the out loud complaining, the out loud character assassination of others, that type of thing. And so at the root of all of that, what happened for me this last weekend is as I walked through that, and I was almost like observing it from a third party, just because I don't really go there too much anymore. What I was revisiting a behavior and an emotional response to something that I dealt with 6 years ago, which at that particular time in my life was pretty, it put me in therapy. I mean, and I'm not talking, it was, what I'm doing today. I had begun this back in 2017, and I had taken off like a firecracker, a lot of motivation, really just ready to go. Energetically, I think I got ahead of myself. And so there came a time in August of 2018 where I just stopped. I just stopped producing. I stopped wanting to influence. I stopped, it was like a light switch just shut off. And for the following 2 to 4 years, I spent questioning myself, what happened? Why did it all of a sudden stop? And as I was grappling with that one problem in the past, consistently trying to get to the root of it, life was still dishing life, right? Like, the day job's not going exactly like I want it to. I'm kind of outgrowing it. As I grow in my own skin and my own realizations, I become more aware of other people's dysfunctions that maybe I no longer want to tolerate. That was happening professionally for me. We have a family of recovery from addiction and alcoholism. We've had a couple kids in that process who have suffered. And so we've been like so there was a lot of life circumstances going on. So this one incident back in 2018, when the light switch went off, is what it felt like. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, why did that happen? And there's many, many things I have figured out today, because now it's come full circle around that. But what happened this last weekend was when I got overwhelmed and I started questioning what I was doing or how I was doing it. And I became frustrated because it wasn't fast enough. It wasn't enough fast enough. I wanted results yesterday. I didn't want to have to do the work. And why was I so? And it wasn't about being lazy. It wasn't about not developing skill set. It was none of that BS. It was just literally, I lacked patience. I lacked patience in the process. Have you ever lacked patience in the process? Have you ever went to get finished with one objective and 20 other things got in the way that had to be accomplished before that one objective could get solved for you? That's what I'm talking about. The not enough, fast enough is a direct result of a lack of patience and trusting the process. Sometimes what will trigger that is a comparison to what you think others have or to what you think others are achieving. You may compare yourself to, it sounds crazy, usually you'll be comparing yourselves to people who have like been doing what you're doing, been doing it for like 10, 20, 30 years more, and you've got this comparison gap that's going on. For me, I just started to get really overwhelmed with how long this was going to take, and I caught it. I caught the crazy. It took me a day or so, but I caught the crazy. And when I caught the crazy, there was a couple things that I walked through emotionally and mentally and physically that I'm going to be talking about for the rest of the show to help give back to somebody who might be in the middle of building your dream. Maybe you're in the middle of deciding, is this the job I want to stay at? Maybe you're in the middle of, do I want to get a divorce or do I want to stay? I had a woman in my life recently who was having to face the decision that she was going to have to go back into treatment for alcoholism because the wreckage had caught up with her. And it was just one of those things that needed to happen. Like there are challenges and there are things that come up in our life. And how do we spot them so that we can catch the crazy in its infancy and not allow it to grow into a wildfire? How do we catch it? Because that feeling that I'm sharing with you that I went through over the weekend, that feeling overwhelmed me for 2 to 4 years. Some might call this emotional trauma. I'm a little sensitive around the word trauma. I don't like to give it more power than it deserves. But the emotional reaction, and I would like to say response, but it was no damn response. It was a reaction. It impacted me mentally and physiologically also. So as I go throughout the show today, I'm going to be sharing some of the things that people will go through that will trigger the crazy. And then towards a couple segments in, I'm going to be going through what are the solutions for that. I've shared a couple of them already in just this share, but what are the solutions and how can we take a look at that? All right. So what is your signature crazy? Have you identified it yet? It's going to be unique to you. Some people may have similarities to you, but it's going to be unique to you because it's your experience to have. How good are you at checking it? Like once you feel it coming on, how good are you at stopping it from moving forward? Does it take you a day? Does it take you 2 days? How intimate are you with your crazy? And the last one is, what are you doing about it? And have you gotten to, actually before what are you doing about it? Have you gotten to the root of the crazy for that particular situation? Our behaviors and our responses will pretty much run congruent with when we're under stress or overwhelmed or whatever that is. But how often that comes up for us, that is the game changer, because once we understand that we can get to the root of a problem and that we don't have to revisit because we can reframe it with our mindset, we can take a new perspective on it. We may know our signature crazy, but it doesn't dominate us anymore. In fact, they are few and far between, which I am happy to say that this one took me only a couple days to pull through. All right. So having said that, we will be back here shortly. We're going to take a short break. If you'd like to converse with me about your signature crazy, you can reach out to me at SusanDenee.com. Denee is DENEE.com, or you can check out any of my social media sites, which are pretty much Susan Denee, Know You're Crazy. All right, we'll be back shortly. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Know You're Crazy Talk Show. My name is Susan Denee, and you are listening to Emotional Recovery in the Raw. Today's show is all about spotting your signature crazy before it catches wildfire, before it damages all the relationships around you. Once you identify with the signature crazy, how quick are you to turn the boat around? How quick are you to put the brakes on and squash whatever the insanity is that's going on between your ears? Those are the top questions, right? In the first segment, I was talking about different things that'll happen when our signature crazy goes off, different behaviors that we'll exhibit. Maybe that's grouchiness. Maybe it's a short temper with those close to us. Maybe it's overspending. Maybe it's overeating. Who knows? But there's a certain behavior that goes along with the signature crazy. Usually when it's gone off the charts, you might be someone, and some of those behaviors might go internally, like you isolate, you go away, you disappear, you shut the door, you don't let nobody in, right? That could be another way that the behaviors show up with your signature crazy. After that, I was talking about, you've got behaviors, you've got body reactions, and then you've got thinking. And so all these things, these are all kind of part of that signature crazy. And as you begin to identify which ones are dominating you in the moment, for example, signature crazy shows up, there's going to be behavior. That's usually the first one that you're going to realize because that's the loudest. If you're a depression, if you're a depressed type of person that you isolate a lot, when you go dark, you don't need me to explain that to you. You know what I mean? Like, when you go dark. And so these are signature crazy behaviors that we have, and they're usually the loudest. They're the most pronounced. They're the ones that show up first for us. And then think about the body and how it's impacting your body at the time. Okay, the physical or physiological reaction that you have to your crazy is a whole other level. When I say level, just a different sort, a different type of impact on you. So the question for you is, how well do you have a relationship with your body? How well do you have a relationship with your body? Recently, my husband decided to try my doctor, and she's a naturopath. And it's first time he's really embraced that particular mode of healing versus the traditional Western medicine doctor. And one of the things that she had commented on him was that how tense he felt, just how kind of like wound tight. And him and I, when we were talking about this, I kind of chuckled and I said, it's funny because we might be holding tension in our body, but we still get a lot of stuff done. Like, it doesn't always feel tense around one another. Every now and then we can tell when one of us in the house is kind of like really intense or angry, like you could tell on Friday with me. I have gotten to the point where I warn people, or I just say, hey, I need to get to an AA meeting. Let's chill out a little bit. But I was talking about, isn't it funny how another person can pick up on our amount of tension that we are holding within our bodies, but we become so numb to it because we've been carrying that tension for so long, right? We've been carrying that tension for so long. The same thing with your signature crazy. When it is impacting your body, this may have been happening for a long time for you. Are you familiar with what's going on within your body? I've worked with women who have many, many health issues, and they also struggle with relaxing, just relaxing. And the muscles like to relax when they are in a safe environment. The muscles relax when they feel safe. However, if the messages that I'm sending to my body is that everything out here is not going as planned, and I'm emotionally reacting to this, such as in the signature crazy is acting up, then the body's taking a hit on that. How well do you know your body? That's the question. So one of the things that I started to look into, I was reading a book not too long ago, and they were talking about somatic awareness. And what somatic awareness is when a person acknowledges their own self within their environment and uses sensations to identify the psychological, physiological, and social factors to promote healing and self-regulation. I joined this writers group. It's like this challenge that I've got going on with this fantastic two guys who are writers and bloggers. And so you're learning how to, you're just learning how to tweet, really. Paid a couple $100 to know how to do Twitter. That's where my life's at. But anyway, what was I saying? Okay. But one of the people in the community had posted something about some new technology that's going to be able to, read your vitals and tell you when you're stressed. And I was reflecting on that conversation I had with my husband, and I thought, oh my goodness, if a doctor, I don't know if I want to know that all the time. I don't know if it's like people who use Fitbits. God bless you. I don't care how many calories I burn at night. Like that would make me feel worse. It would just like, it's so much monitoring going on. Like when is there too much information being said? I like to organically try to attempt to figure out or solve my problems on my own, but I don't want technology telling me I'm stressed, because then I got to worry about that too. Not only do I have to worry about when I'm stressed, but I need to worry about when this gadget's telling me I'm stressed. I mean, God forbid, if you feel overwhelmed, don't buy that thing, whatever that is. Why am I talking about that? Because my response, my tweet back to that literally was, wouldn't it be nice if we just became more aware of our bodies and learned how to self-regulate when we are under stress? Like, have we become in tune enough to understand? Are you in tune enough with your signature CrAzY to understand when that tension is being held within your body? Have you ever been sitting there all of a sudden, then you just realize like you're holding tight for some reason and you don't even know you're doing it? I've done that. Or like, what am I squeezing my hands for? Like, I'm sitting here watching a movie, like it's not even an action movie, but are there times when you catch that because the body is like in reaction to something? And so the somatic awareness is understanding how that environment around you and what's going on around you is impacting you psychologically and physiologically, so that you become more self-aware in your body. It's a term, another term they use with that is somatic psychotherapy. It's been used more frequently over the past few years as scientific research is proving that in humans, we store memories of experience and emotions on a cellular level, which means it's not all in your head. Signature CrAzY isn't all in your head. It's also being stored in your body. The story that I was sharing with you at the beginning of the show, as I'm struggling last week and I'm up against this old mindset, I'm up against something that was talking to me in 2018 and continued to have a root of belief in my mind about what happened. Why did this occur? How did I all of a sudden burn out? Like there was an immediate emotional reaction in my present to an old belief that had happened in my past that took me a long time to come full circle full circle around. The problem that I had was I hadn't quite got that point on Friday, but I recognized the behavior. And then I recognized my breathing, what was going on within my body, not breathing clearly, but feeling that tension. Honestly, the behavior, the irritability was the number one, like that was number one. And then as I started to understand and kind of get to the bottom of what was going on with my emotional reaction to what was being present for me, I got to revisit and I got to ask myself, when did I last feel like this? And what am I doing that's similar to when I last felt like this? What was going on? And so as you become more of an observer to your behaviors, and as you become more of an observer to your body and how it's reacting to you, which really is just indicating another sign for you that something's not right with you. And I say right with you in a very non-shaming way. I don't mean it shameful at all, but you know when you're right and you know when you're not right. You know when you're on the top of your game and you know when you're not on the top of your game. And if you're somebody who's spending a lot of time not on the top of your game, then you've got some CrAzY that's out of control. You've got some CrAzY that's kind of running and gunning and doing what it wants to do. And really what it comes down to is understanding, what do I need to do physiologically? What do I need to do emotionally to get these things back in check for myself so that I can become more in alignment with my best self and not my crazy self? All right. So reliving old feelings and having those old feelings and those old situations stored in your body is actually happening on a cellular level. And this is kind of where it does kind of butt up against that trauma conversation, where if you've got old experiences being stored in the body, where your head's not the only one reacting to the moment, your body is also. What I experienced last week was an old, when I say old, 6 years old, trouble that I really struggled with on why all of a sudden my motivation left. And if you were watching the show last week, I was sharing openly about me thinking motivation is a 4-letter word. I mean, I was even sharing about this same topic. That all came from the root of 2018 when I burned out. Many people, I don't know if we talk enough about burnout and what can actually lead to burnout, but it is a state of not enough fast enough and trying to get everything accomplished and done. And I'm telling you, there's a lack of patience involved with that. And I think we underappreciate the lack of patience that is involved when we're trying to grow to a new level. It reminded me when I first got sober. And when you first get sober, you hit any type of significant rock bottom. Maybe you filed bankruptcy, maybe you've been divorced. For me, and I think for some people, there tends to be a desire to make it better quickly. Make it better quickly. How fast can I put the pieces of the puzzle back together? How fast can I bring solution into this so that I can heal the wounds that I've created in my life? How quickly can I get this done? And there's this sense of urgency fueled by a new perspective that the old way was no longer working. The old way is no longer working. And once you wake up to that new perspective that the old way is no longer working, sometimes there's a sense of urgency that you can't do it quick enough, fast enough. All right, so I'm going to come back here shortly. I'm going to come back after break, and we're going to be moving into the thinking that goes on with the signature CrAzY. There is a story that's being told along with the behaviors, along with the body reactions, and I'm going to go into detail about the thinking when we return. In fact, I think the thinking is one of my favorite topics to talk on. Yeah. All right. So if you want to get a hold of me, if you're interested in any one-on-one coaching, you can always go to my website at susandenee.com. I am offering weekly free coaching right now on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. You simply click on the registration for Zoom, and I will be in touch with you. And that is Thursday, Fridays, and Saturdays at 11 a.m. Emotional elevation on Thursday, high performance coaching on Friday, and Saturday is relationship reset, if you are so bold. All right, we will be back shortly. Thanks. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Know Your CrAzY Talk Show. My name is Susan Denee, and you are listening to Emotional Recovery in the Raw. Specifically today, I'm talking about understanding your signature CrAzY. Can you spot it before it becomes a wildfire? How in life, when we hit a speed bump throughout, could be week to week, whatever comes up for us, are we understanding our signature CrAzY well enough that we can catch it before we blow up our relationships or run out of the job upset? And so some of this sometimes goes with just identifying your signature CrAzY. I've done shows in the past and will continue to probably do shows about different personality types and what's characteristic of each type as far as how we respond and react to different things. I'm not so much going into that today as much as, I am subtly kind of sort of bringing up the behaviors because those tend to be the most out loud when our CrAzY is going off. Those going to be like an indicator. If you're looking for a signature CrAzY alarm per se, the first one that's going to go off are the behaviors, whether you're, like me and you might start complaining out loud, or you're internalizing, you isolate, you move away from people, places, things. There's a behavioral response, a reaction. It's not even a response. It's a behavioral reaction that goes on. We might be short with those close to us. Our sentences are short. Things irritate us normally when they don't irritate us. We might overeat, we might overspend. Like there's going to be an outward expression usually, or an expression of some sort that goes on with our behaviors. And then I was talking in the last segment about the body's response to our signature CrAzY when we are in the moment. I was sharing a little bit on somatic therapy, which is essentially just understanding your environment and the situation and how it's impacting you mentally, physiologically. I shared with you that scientists, recently has been talked a lot about, because science and research has found that the emotions or the trauma per se is not only in our mind and in our emotions, but it's actually being stored in our body. So this is why people might experience body anxiety. Sometimes it doesn't seem like anything has triggered that on the outside, but there's a body anxiety that they're carrying with us. All of this can be an indicator of a signature CrAzY that we carry within ourselves. And then let's see, where was I at? So now what I'm really excited on this segment, I get really geeked out kind of about how we process our thinking. To me, the thoughts that we create on our own, or our perception in life and how we view things, is truly at the root of our experience, whether that experience is going to be positive for me or you, or negative for me or you. The thinking is literally adopted from the perception. And I can go way back. I think I was listening to something the other day where they were talking about toxic people and their behaviors is learned before the age of 6 or 7. And this person was making a point to express really toxic people. Like if you're in a relationship or you're around somebody who's extremely toxic, usually those behaviors that they've adopted go way back, like 6 or 7. So keep that in mind that if you still want to stay in that relationship with that person, it may not be a good idea. Having said that, as adults, we now have this mind that we get to choose how we think and perceive things. Often an adult who's been held hostage by their unknowing of how they operate or how they are in their relationships, they've almost been on cruise control, maybe in some sort level. I don't know if you want to call it denial, or they just can't see it, right? Like you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. Under a lot of that is the thinking. When I'm working with individuals one-on-one in coaching format or in mentoring and recovery, I like to get to how they process. What are they thinking? What's going on between the ears? I used to share all the time that I knew that I was insane when I was having imaginary conversations between my ears with somebody and I was winning. That was an example of how my crazy was showing up. But it was one of the first examples that I knew as soon as I started thinking that way, that something was going on with me. And I was able to not give power to that. In fact, I was able to squash that type of pattern of thinking immediately, because I started understanding what thinking was supporting my growth and what thinking was not supporting my growth. And so that's what I'm going to ask you today. What thinking is supporting you in your growth today, and what thinking is not supporting you in your growth today? I shared briefly before I went to break that the old way wasn't working no more. Coming full circle this last weekend with my own crazy and how it I got caught off guard a little bit. I was applying an old method of showing up in what I thought was doing something good, but I was applying these old methods that really caused me to be burned out 4 or 6 years ago. And I was able to catch that. And the question, what really came to mind for me was the old way wasn't working no more. Like that old way doesn't work no more. So are you willing to learn a new way? And then once you take a look at the circumstance that is no longer working for you and you've made a decision, okay? Did you hear that? You made a decision to do something differently. Have you surrendered completely to the old way? What I was up against was trying to force motivation versus allowing inspired motivation. That's what I was up against. And the more I dove in, the more frustrated I got. Are you open to creating a new experience for yourself? And are you placing yourself in a situation to hear new influence for you? I had a friend reach out to me, one I used to work with, and she was coming by the house to grab something. And she was going up to this fair up the street. And I thought, I didn't even know that fair was in the neighborhood. So I called another friend and we all show up at this fair, and I'm working with this gentleman and he says to me, I'm just supposed to let you know that you can't help others if you're not helping yourself. This is coming off a couple of days where I'm like intense and I'm all wound up tight and I'm trying to get stuff accomplished. I'm forcing my motivation. But what I was doing was I was placing myself in an environment that felt relaxed. It felt joyful. It was like playtime. It was like playtime. How often are you playing? How often are you leaving yourself open-minded enough to hear a positive message? When he said that to me, my first reaction was, well, I know that. Of course, well, that's common sense. I know that, right? As soon as you say, I know that, when somebody's giving you feedback, you shut off any ability to receive what they're saying to you. I caught that with what I did with him. And then later on, I started to reflect. And he was so true, because what I had lost sight of was my way I was confronting issues last week was very reminiscent of what I used to do, and the old way didn't work. And so are you open to a new way of doing things? And what is your thinking behind that? And how is that thinking going to be supporting you? Another way to look at this is when you start to dissect the thinking, check your motives behind what it is you're doing and how you're doing it. We often get tangled up sometimes in relationships. Ask yourself in the relationship, if the relationship isn't producing for you what you would hope it would be producing for you at this stage of the relationship, what are your patterns in the relationship? Not your partner's patterns, but what are your patterns of thinking in the relationship? I recently worked with a fantastic individual that was sharing with me that their thinking usually dealt with what a lot of us get caught in a trap of, overanalyzing the situation, trying to figure it out, knowing enough just to be dangerous about how thinking and actions how it can work. Many of us in recovery from alcoholism and addiction, and I talk on that topic because that's the topic I know. It wouldn't be fair for me to talk about other topics that I don't know anything about, like, significant, 100-pound weight loss, things like that. That wasn't my experience. Well, my experience is overcoming drugs and alcohol. That's my experience. And I will tell you, when you come full center around a problem that has got you leveled to your knees, that has stolen your life, that you feel like there's no hope for tomorrow, when that levels you and you wake up to a new awareness, whoo, all I'm saying is questioning that thinking and how you got there can at times feel overwhelming, but you do it and then you become an expert at overly analyzing behaviors to the point of not expressing. So that might be a little bit too many layers there that I'm sharing here. But this individual was sharing that the thinking about the partner's behavior was to the point of always overanalyzing, to the point of not expressing how certain behaviors may affect them. Has that ever happened to you? What is your thinking about your relationships? What is your thinking about your current situation? If you are in a position, in a job or a situation that you want to change, but it's not changing, or you're feeling stuck, I guarantee you there's a pattern of thinking that's not been serving you. And the best thing that you can do at that point is either stop thinking about it by going and playing and having fun and doing something else, or finding the ability to sit down and really write through it to get to the bottom of what's going on in that thinking. So becoming intimate and up close with your thinking, because here's the thing, you cannot grow if you are suffering, if you are in a place of self-judgment, inner criticism, shame, guilt, or self-hatred. You cannot grow effectively, I will add, if you are in a consistent place of self-judgment, inner criticism, shame, guilt, or self-hatred. It will not work. Okay, it will not work. When we become over analytical about how we confront life or how we process things, what happens is we end up avoiding the problems. We end up avoiding because we're finding our safety within the overanalyzation of what's going on. If I can figure you out, if I think I know what you're thinking, if I can justify your behaviors because I know you came from this background, it all would make sense. If I had that background, I too would behave that way. In fact, I spend so much time thinking about what you've done and what happened to you that I neglect myself and avoid the fact that I'm being mistreated. Does that resonate with anybody? Are you overthinking to the point where you forgot to stand up for yourself? Maybe, and that's okay. Are you familiar? Are you intimate with your thinking? Do you really truly understand what's going on within you? Because all of it connects to your CrAzY. All of it connects to how am I operating if the relationships in your life, if the outcome of your life is not fulfilling for you. There's something going on in the thinking and the pattern in which you've created that's no longer serving you. When I went where I went last week and I got overwhelmed and I got frustrated, I had to take a real look at the pattern of thinking that I was starting to develop. And that pattern of thinking felt familiar and it did not feel joyful. It did not feel joyful. And I don't know about any of you, but I didn't do the work that I've done to get to where I'm at in order to digress and return to an old self that no longer serves me. I don't know about you, but I ain't going back. I ain't going back. Do you want to go back or do you want to move forward? And that's where that self-judgment and that self-criticism and that guilt and shame needs to be completely uprooted and gotten rid of if you want to make some progress moving forward. When I come back from break, I'm going to be talking about, now that we've got the behaviors talked about, we've got the physiological side talked about, we've got the thinking talked about, what do we do about it? How do we get to a place where we can not only avoid the wildfire of the CrAzY, but have a few days of sheer joy so that we can shift and make a new decision in a healthy way for ourselves? What do we got to do? So for this last segment, I'm going to come back with the tools and the solutions that you get to apply in your life. If you've got some signature crazy that's getting a little bit out of control that you'd like to spot check and make a shift. I know for me, it was a defining moment. It was a defining moment of how I'm going to take this journey moving forward from here on out. And I get to spot check it with my new awareness. All right, we will be back here shortly. If you're wanting one-on-one coaching, you'd like to reach out to me, you can do that at susandenee.com. Also, if the fear of financial, all right, let's talk about money. I'm an ex-bill collector. I don't mind talking about money. If it's a fear of financial, I can't afford it, then I'm offering free coaching sessions this week on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays at 11 a.m. You can see those at my website. Simply just click register and sign up, and I will be there group coaching. All right, be back shortly. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Know Your Crazy Talk Show. My name is Susan Denee, and you are listening to Emotional Recovery in the Raw. Today's topic is, do you know enough about your signature crazy so that you can catch it before it becomes like a wildfire that takes out your relationships, makes you walk out of that job in a fury, makes you lose your temper with your family? You know what I'm talking about. Catching the crazy before it goes off the charts. In the past, I've shared a lot about a couple different personality types that seem to be characteristic. Most people fall into these two personality types. I've shared about that because there's behaviors that are pretty common in each one of those categories. When we get into our signature crazy and really wanting to catch it before, before it becomes wildfire, the first thing that'll pop up first is our behaviors. Our behaviors will become obnoxious. We might become short with family. We might internalize. Maybe we isolate. Maybe we overspend. Maybe we're grabbing the Ben and Jerry's ice cream out of the freezer and downing it and then feeling guilty and loathing later. Whatever it is, there's a behavior when our crazy's going off, right? And whether or not we catch that behavior before we, 10 buckets of ice cream is what this show's about today. The other thing with our behaviors and after our behaviors with our signature crazy is we get into what are the physiological effects that my body is going through when my signature crazy is about ready to go off the charts. Heightened heart rate might be one. I was talking about some little OCD behaviors that we might partake in. Sometimes it's like, picking a lip, or, some people's like picking their skin, like there's different behavioral things that we do. Our body could have, heart palpitations. You might get a tight chest. I was sharing in the other segment about somatic therapy. Somatic therapy is pretty centered around understanding your environment and where you're at and how your body's responding to that. And then, what you can do to change that up for yourself. And then the last segment before we went to break, I was sharing about the crazy thinking that we can go through. But ultimately, the thinking is at the root of the signature crazy. The thinking and how we perceive a problem or how we perceive a life event is going to really determine how far out we take that crazy and how long it lasts. We can revisit old beliefs with a current situation. And if we're adept at mindfulness or catching that, we'll be able to reverse that thinking in a shorter amount of time. The example I've been using the whole show was my experience last week as I was, baffled by online technology and platforms, but not only that, like really just trying to accomplish a whole bunch in a short amount of time. Have you ever done that? You've got 20 things on the list, you're making headway, and then something derails you. And it's like, oh, this isn't one step. There's actually 10 steps involved here. And that lack of patience becomes irritability. It was kind of one of those. And what I realized for me was, 6 years ago, when I was on a similar path and similar journey, I burned out. And as much as I, and I was aware, like it came full circle enough over these last couple of months that I finally got peace around what happened back then. But when I went to dive back in this time doing a similar job or a similar role, I started to behave in a way that I would have 6 years ago, as if I don't know how to do it differently. And then I was able to reflect on all the lessons I had learned since that time and really reflect on my journey and the different life transformations I've been through, to only be open enough to some feedback from somebody that said, if you want to help others, you got to help yourself. And I thought I knew that message. Like I really thought I knew that message to my core. However, that's not the message I was living last week. I had reverted to an old behavior, which was causing me overwhelm, which would be a recipe for burnout if I don't catch it. Okay, if I don't catch it. This brings me into the last part of this show that I'm going to speak about to help provide a couple solutions that you can do if you've got some crazy that you're like, well, how do I figure it out? One, I've talked a lot about identify the behaviors. You know the behaviors that don't feel good to you. You know the behaviors that your family complains about. I often say that the world is giving you feedback. It's just whether or not you're paying attention to that, or if you're dismissing the feedback that you're receiving as not relevant. Let me just say that again. You might be dismissing the feedback that the universe is giving you because you've justified it as not relevant. For those of you who are in relationships that might have a couple rocky spots, that might be for you. So as we get into the solution, that's one thing, paying attention to the behaviors in your life that are not serving you, paying attention to, is the universe giving me feedback? Do I have a constant, is there repeaters that my relationships are giving me? Are they constantly saying something about my behavior or my lack of, is there something that continues to come up that maybe I'm really not addressing? And do I have enough humility to really look at that? And this is where reflection comes into play. So the first thing I'm going to talk is reflection, to stop and ask yourself, what was that all about? If you've just come out of a moment of crazy, or if you've got some of those behaviors that are coming up for you on a regular basis, to just pause and really ask yourself, what was that all about? That's what I did this last weekend when I felt myself being irritated and really short-tempered with people around me. I had to stop and ask myself, what's going on there? Like, where did that turn? And there were some obvious answers to it, but I had to take it a little bit differently. You know, when your signature crazy is going off, and it's sometimes it's more often than you'd like, I challenge you to put yourself in a place where you are open to feedback. Are you ever surrounding yourself with anybody around you who's able to help give you feedback? Are you remaining open to what others may share about your experience? This might mean that you go get a therapist. This might mean that you join a recovery group. I don't know. But are you putting yourself in a situation where you might experience a new perception that could change your life? Could change your life. If you are somebody who is routinely frustrated or not happy with the results in your life, I would challenge you and say that you're not placing yourself in a group of people or even with a one-on-one situation enough where people can give you feedback that you are open to receiving and at least considering if their feedback is a possibility for you. Another one is write down your feelings about yourself and be perfectly honest as much as you can. How do you really feel about yourself? I was working with a woman one time, and out of the blue, she came up to me to start talking, and I could tell she was upset. And I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel? 10 being fantastic, and 1 is I'm just a horrible person. And she said, I'm a 1. And it just tore my heart out, because I thought, God, that's got to be horrible when you feel that way about yourself. But if that's how you feel about yourself, write it out. Start to be honest with yourself about what's really going on. We cannot have a new experience if we are not willing to look at where we're at today and how we feel about ourselves. Here's the other thing. Don't give in. Just work with it. Don't give in. Just work with it. Sometimes our best is just the best. It's just got to be good enough. It doesn't mean that you need to stop and run to extremes and quit trying. Just work with what you got. Because what you got really is enough right here, right now. It really is enough. So don't give in, just work with it. Let's see what else. Oh, when you get frustrated or overwhelmed, to simply take a look at fear and ask yourself, what am I scared of? I had to ask myself last week, what was I scared of? And I was scared of not getting enough done in a short amount of time. Seems like I'm the only person in control of that. All right. And I'm getting ready to wrap up here pretty soon. The point is, if you've got some crazy that is running for you and you're having a hard time wrapping your arms around it, stop, reflect, ask yourself what's going on, write it down, write your feelings about yourself, how you feel, place yourself in a position of open feedback, and just work with it. Just work with it for today. All right, folks, I am going to be out of here now. Hey, if you want to do one-on-one coaching with me, you can go to my website at susandenee.com. I'm offering free coaching every week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 11 a.m. Thursdays is emotional elevation. Friday is high performance coaching. And Saturday is relationship reset. All right. Well, you guys have a fantastic evening. It's been good. Watch out for that signature CrAzY and don't let it catch wildfire. You have been listening to Know You're Crazy.
CrAzY.
And my name is Susan Denee. We are identifying, understanding, and treating your crazy one episode at a time. Tune in to transformationtalkradio.com. To connect with me or Growth Spurt Your Life, please visit susandenee.com. That's Susan Denee, DENEE.com.